We are live. Splendid. We're so happy to have all of you here with us. Good evening, everyone on Facebook. Good evening, everyone on YouTube. And of course, those of you joining here right now on Zoom. We're happy to have you. We are describing a roadmap for a moral society. For those of you who have not seen these sessions and you're just joining in right now, a short synopsis. We have these beautiful quotations that are from the Baha'i writings. They are divided by category. We've been discussing various categories of, again, subjects that relate to this roadmap for a moral society to function, a society that is full of life, peace, and of course, one that is progressive and one that yields, hopefully, the unity of this whole planet that does not destroy itself. Rather, it continues to progress in ever advancing civilization. With that in mind, we've discussed various subjects. The previous subject that we just started, which we will discuss today, relates to the covenant between humanity and God. And of course, there's a few variations and a few details we're going to be talking about probably. But that being said, we wanted to just relate something that 2 points. That first, everyone joining here, we all have our thoughts and our opinions we'll be offering. So again, use this as an area for you to learn from each other, and of course, do your own research, investigate yourself. Secondly, there are some provisional translations we have from the Baha'i writings found in Farsi or Arabic. That being said, these provisional translations won't be found if you go to the Baha'i Reference Library or if you go to Ocean 2.0 Interfaith Reader, oceanlibrary.com. If you go to these places, you won't find some of these quotes only because they are provisional. They are translations made by some endeavoring Baha'is trying to bring alive these quotes that maybe only Farsi or Arabic speakers can currently read. Of course, to us in the English language. That being said, we thank Mr. Gilbert Hakim for putting together these beautiful PowerPoint slides so we can sit here together on a session and review all these beautiful quotes and, most importantly, learn from them as we discuss them together. So as we start our session to learn, we start first with our prayer, and this prayer will set the spiritual tone where we will have this in our hearts as we read these quotes, we discuss with one another, and we try to glean these spiritual truths together. I imagine we have a volunteer to be opening this session with a prayer. Armin, please, welcome.
My God, whom I worship and adore, I bear witness unto thy unity and thy oneness, and acknowledge thy gifts both in the past and in the present. Thou art the all bountiful, the overflowing showers of thy mercy have rained down upon high and low alike, and the splendors of whose grace have been shed over both the obedient and the rebellious. O God of mercy, before whose door the quintessence of mercy had bowed down, and round the sanctuary of whose cause loving kindness in his inmost spirit had circled. We beseech thee, entreating thy ancient grace and seeking thy present favor, that thou may have mercy upon all who are the manifestation of the world of being, and deny them not the outpouring of thy grace in thy days. All are but poor and needy, and thou verily art the all-possessing, the all-subduing, the all-powerful. Baha'u'llah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to reference some explanation on the previous paragraph you reviewed last week, and there's some explanation related to Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi relative to the meaning of most mighty branch and the chosen branch. So these are the two which is assigned to Abdu'l-Baha and Shoria Effendi. So branch basically signifies descendant of Baha'u'llah. You have Afnan and Ahsan. So Ahsan is the branch. Afnan were family members of the Bab. So this here also, this I did a little bit calculation on this. This fulfillment of the prophet Daniel is 1335 days is actually year 1335 in a lunar calendar. So if you subtract that 1260 from it, you get 75 years basically. Now, if you add that to passing of Baha'u'llah, which was 1892, you end up with basically and add 10 years to it, you end up with 1957, which is the election of Universal House of Justice in 1957. So it was interesting, which numerically fits the election of Universal House of Justice. So this was, I just wanted to just clarify some of these words that used last week. So now we're going to go to the new, again, follow the covenant and testament of God. So we need a volunteer to read.
I'll go ahead and volunteer.
Go ahead.
The will of the divine testor is this. It is incumbent upon the Agzan and Afnan and my kindred to turn one and all their faces towards the most mighty branch. Consider that which we have revealed in our most holy book. When the ocean of my presence hath ebbed and the book of my revelation is ended, turn your faces towards him whom God hath proposed, whom hath branched from this ancient root. The object of the sacred verse is none other except the most mighty branch. Thus have we graciously revealed unto you our potent will. I am verily the gracious, the all-powerful. And this is from the Kitabi Akdas, Book of Covenant.
Yes. All right. So will of the divine testator is this. It is incumbent upon Ahsan and Afnan and my kindred to turn one and all their faces toward the most mighty branch. Obviously here he's promoting Abdu'l-Baha to be this most mighty branch, and all the descendant of the Bab and Baha'u'llah should basically homage and accept him as the leader of the faith after passing of Baha'u'llah. Consider that which we have revealed in our most holy book. So this is in Aqdas. When the ocean of my present had ebbed and the book of my revelation is ended, turn your faces toward him whom God had purposed, who had branched from this ancient root. So what is the ancient roots? Obviously, we know manifestations of God, their soul is ancient. That means that pre-existed. And Baha'u'llah is from the lineage of all the prior manifestation that their soul was ancient as well. That means they were pre-existed. That's the reason they have the knowledge of the prior manifestation and the future manifestation. And they only reveal, when they appear on earth, they only reveal based on ills and the maladies of the humanity at the time. They reveal those pearls from the ocean of revelation itself. So that's really a meaning of the ancient root, basically. The object of this sacred verse is none other except the most mighty branch, which is Abdu'l-Baha. The object of this sacred verse, again, thus have we graciously revealed unto you our potent will, and I am verily the gracious, the all-powerful. So this doesn't put any doubt in anybody's mind who he was addressing as being the leader of the religion. And of course, there were before, there were customs that, for example, when a leader of a family would pass on, for example, the eldest brother would take their place. So there were a lot of controversy in terms of claims that people had when Baha'u'llah was passing. And of course, Abdu'l-Baha had to endure those turmoils that caused by these people that wanted to usurp the helm of the Baha'i religion at the time. So Afnan are basically relatives of the Bab. All right, so let's go to the next one.
I can read this too if you want.
Go ahead.
The men of God's house of justice have been charged with the affairs of the people. They, in truth, are the trustees of God amongst his servants and the daysprings of authority in his countries. O people of God, that which traineth the world is justice, for it is upheld by two pillars, reward and punishment. These two pillars are the source of life to the world, inasmuch as for each day there is a new problem, and for every problem an expedient solution. Such affairs should be referred to the ministers of the House of Justice, that they may act according to the needs and requirements of the time. Okay. Note that the passage is preceded in this latter case by the statement, this passage now written by the pen of glory is accounted as part of the most holy book, from which may be inferred that it is the earlier of the two slightly differing versions of the passage contained in Bisharat and Esrakot. Okay.
Bisharat and Esrakot.
Right.
All right, so men of God's house of justice have been charged with the affairs of the people. So obviously, this is a description of this house of justice when, if and when it was put together. They, in truth, are the trustee of God among his servants and the dayspring of authority in his countries. So all people, because Universal House of Justice is elected by members of national assemblies of basically every country. So these are basically so they have jurisdiction into every country. O people of God, that which traineth the world is justice, for it is upheld by two pillars. So the purpose of Universal House of Justice is interpretation of text and render justice, basically. That means revelation of the truth, and they're the only one that are allowed to interpret the text, reveal text. So that's generally their purpose. So here now, pillars of that justice is obviously reward and punishment. So again, they render justice through rewards and punishment. Now, these two pillars are the source of life to the world. Obviously, you give praise to people when people do good, and you reprimand them when, or punish them when they deviate from the word of God. So these are really how the whole system of the world would work. In as much as for each day there is a new problem, and for every problem an explicit expedient solution. So here it is very interesting that this is the first revelation of God that is self-correcting. That means that the laws would get interpreted based on exigencies of the time that they exist. So this is very important from perspective of ability to reform and bring in new laws, and they can upgrade their own laws as well, to be able to correct itself, basically. So needs and requirements of the time. So this is the basic definition of what they're supposed to do. So in Baha'i doctrine, the process is basically generalities of laws. And it's not legalistic religion like, for example, Judaism or Islam, that interferes and defines minute actions of each individual. So that is basically left for the universal house of justice based on exigencies of the time and applicability of those laws to regulate interaction of humans in general. So major laws are defined, and the rest, human interaction, is left for decisions of universal house of justice, that they can create their own laws based on exigency, and they can abrogate their own laws, but they cannot change the laws of the revelation itself. So now you see there is a mechanism added to the traditional doctrine of trying to expand the definition of the revelation to cover everything. So that's really not feasible or possible. So this mechanism, which is self-correcting mechanism that takes the obsolescence out of the laws that are human interaction. Remember, every revelation has two parts. One is rituals and laws related to human interaction. The other one is spiritual laws and attributes of God, which is innate in every human being, which is common across all religions. But the segment which relates to rituals and human interaction is the one that is changing generally. So ethical laws, which are common and is permanent, cannot be changed by universal house of justice. But they can, based on exigencies of the time, they can create their own laws, and if it doesn't apply, they can abrogate it. So nobody can change, let's say, laws of abortion or laws of suicide. You cannot change those. Or universal house of justice cannot change them, because the explicit laws of Avdas. All right, any comments, questions on this one?
Yes, Gilbert. I was just going to be a little bit facetious in explaining that why the House of Justice can abrogate its own laws, because society is in a constant motion of change. And it is to say that, for example, if we are forbidden alcohol at this moment in time in our development, the example being that in the future, alcohol may not be abrogated. It's just, I'm adding to that to say that the laws that are binding at the moment are because of the needs of the age in which they're being administered. But as the age where it's being administered in, as it develops, it's necessary for the Universal House of Justice to have license, if you will, to abrogate for the best interests as society develops, is my point. Thank you.
Sure. But remember, when you're dealing with this kind of laws, for example, what would happen with people that had, for example, multiple wives, or they were consuming hashish or opium during the Abdu'l-Baha's time? So the question really, there is a transitional period that application of those laws may be postponed, but the law itself cannot be changed. So it's the question of, for example, up to a couple of decades ago, Western societies were exempt from law, for example, although it was a law. But they slowly introduced that into the Western society as well. But the ability to abrogate law is not in the jurisdiction of Universal House of Justice. All right, let's go to the next one.
I'll catch it. Repeatedly were these exalted words heard from his blessed tongue. He said, he inspires the hearts of those who, wholly for the sake of God, gather in the council chamber and discourse regarding the best interests of his servants. He verily is the defender of all them that do good. Let's see, that of Baha'u'llah, tablet of the amanuensis Mirza Akadran.
So he inspired the hearts of those who wholly for the sake of God gather in the council chamber and discourse regarding the best interests of his servant. So this is really, again, Universal House of Justice member that are trusted to create the laws and abrogate if it doesn't work or it doesn't apply. Here, again, they're getting inspiration from God. So not individually, but as a entity. So Universal House of Justice is under protection of God. Or question of infallibility. So here, that inspiration is coming to the in the council chamber to those 9 members of the Universal House of Justice. So here he verily is the defender of all them that do good. So that protection of God is afforded to these 9 people because their goal is to do good, and they have no affiliation to anyone, which is very rare. You see today in the secular society and secular politics that decisions are made based on affiliation. It is interesting, for example, many years ago, for example, President of Brazil was consulting with Universal House of Justice about the problems that they were facing. So they were recognizing Universal House of Justice as an independent entity that has ethical and follows justice. So this particular independence, and many times NGOs in United Nations actually consult with the Universal House of Justice regarding problems that they face and seek for guidance. So not only Baha'is have recognized or mandated to take their questions and concerns to Universal House of Justice for the final verdict on answer of their questions, even secular institutions recognize it as a source of knowledge and a spiritual knowledge in general. So, and God is a defender of all them that do good. All right, any questions on this?
No
You-
question, but Gilbert, I wanted to add that a contingency from China visited with the House of Justice regarding the junior youth program. And then they send them to Africa, right? I think it was Kenya. I forget where they send them to look at the formation of that quote unquote Baha'i inspired project. And I thought that was quite interesting.
No, of course, people recognize the teachings of the Baha'i religion, which is for universal good. It's not tilted toward certain religious doctrines or certain philosophical group to create inequality in the world. Is the purpose of it is, again, eliminating distinction in this world. So people, based on their capacity, they would given responsibility to perform and reach their potential, but no distinction. So a person is not more valuable than another in the eyes of God. So their behavior based on capacity that is being given to them is the measure of their success.
Yes, Gilbert, can I just ask for a clarification? It's backtracking a little bit between conferred infallibility and quote infallibility. Thank you. And the other thing on this subject is the eventual development of a world tribunal. So it is, to reinforce your statement that it's for society as a whole as well. Thank you.
Sure. Well, infallibility in general only belongs to the manifestation of God. So you have confirmed infallibility or acquired infallibility also. So this issue regarding Universal House of Justice is conferred infallibility to the institution of the Universal House of Justice, not to the individual.
Thank you.
So the decision that collectively they make is has the potency of the being infallible. So that's confirmed. Now, Abdu'l-Baha had acquired infallibility. So this is the processes that they went through from basically being selected as the leader of the faith after passing of Baha'u'llah. All right. Now we're going to go to writings of Abdu'l-Baha. We need a volunteer to read.
Guess I can do this.
Go ahead.
Cool. Okay, from His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha, O my loving friends, after the passing away of this wronged one, it is incumbent upon Agzan and Afnan in the sacred lote tree, the hands of the cause of God, and the loved ones of Abha beauty, to turn into Shoghi Effendi, the youthful branch branched from the two hollowed and sacred lote trees, and the fruit grown from the union of the two offshoots of the tree of holiness. As he is the Son of God, the chosen branch, the guardian of the cause of God, he unto whom all the Agzan and Afnan and the hinds of the cause of God and his loved ones must turn. He is the interpreter of the word of God. After him will succeed the firstborn of his linear descendants, the sacred and youthful branch, the guardian, the cause of God, as well as the universal house of justice, to be universally elected and established, are both under the care and protection of the Abha beauty, under the shelter and unerring guidance of the Exalted One. May my life be offered up for them both. Whatsoever they decide is of God. Whoso obeyeth him not, neither obeyeth them, hath not obeyed God. Whoso rebelleth against him and against them hath rebelled against God. Whoso opposeth him hath opposed God. Whoso contendeth with them hath contended with God. Whoso disputed with him hath disputed with God. Whoso denieth him hath denied God. Whoso disbelieveth in him hath disbelieved in God. Whoso deviateth, separateth himself, and turneth aside from him, hath in turn deviated, separated himself, and turned aside from God. May the wrath of the fierce indignation, the vengeance of God, rest upon him. The mighty stronghold shall remain impregnable and safe through the obedience to him who is the guardian of the cause of God. It is incumbent upon the members of the house of justice, upon all the Agzan and Afnan, in the hands of the cause of God, to show their obedience, submissiveness, and subordination unto the guardian of the cause of God, to turn unto him and be lowly before him. He that opposeth him have opposed the true one, will make a breach in the cause of God, and will subvert his word, and will become a manifestation of the center of sedition. O friends, the hands of the cause of God must be nominated and appointed by the guardian of the cause of God. All must be under the shadow and obey his command. Should any within or without the company of the hands of the cause of God disobey and seek division, the wrath of God and his vengeance will be upon him, for he will have caused a breach in the true faith of God. That's a lot.
Right. Yeah, this is has very interesting concept of acquired infallibility and conferred infallibility, which is very interestingly described here. So, all my loving friends, after the passing away of this wrong one, Abdu'l-Baha says, after I'm gone, it is incumbent upon Ahsan and Afnan, family members of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, of the sacred low tree, the hands of the cause of God, and the loved ones of Abha beauty, to turn unto Shoghi Effendi. So this is a direct reference to the guardian of the faith, which was Shoghi Effendi. So there is no, remember, many of the hands of the cause was assigned by Baha'u'llah, and then Abdu'l-Baha, and then Shoghi Effendi. So these were pioneers of in charge of propagation of the Baha'i faith. So sacred low tree obviously is branch that all the manifestations of the past have come. So here So the youthful branch branched from the two hallowed and sacred low trees, and the fruit grown from the union of the two offshoots of the tree of holiness. So this youthful branch, Shoghi Effendi, hallowed means created holy, and sacred low tree. And the fruit grown from the union of two offshoots of the tree of holiness. So it looks like there was, he was the offshoot from marriage between Ahsan and Afnan. As he is the sign of God, the chosen branch. So he's the chosen branch, the guardian of the cause of God. He unto whom all Ahsan and Afnan, the hands of the cause of God and his loved ones, must turn. So there was no doubt that he was elected at the very young age to guide the Baha'i community and be protectorate of the Holy Spirit and sole interpreter of the holy text. But remember, at that time, also many people that obviously very big scholars fell into the test that they couldn't accept a young member of the family of Baha'u'llah with very little experience to become the guardian of the faith. So some of them went into that test process that they basically wanted to split even, because Shoghi Effendi never traveled to Iran and had no connection with material or physical connection with Baha'i communities in Iran at that time. So he wasn't very well known in the Baha'i community, especially Persian Baha'i community at that time. So people like, for example, a very big scholar called Avare, he was one of the Baha'i scholars, came and told Shoghi Effendi that you can take the West and I'll take the East. And of course, the minute he arrived from Holy Land into his own house, even his wife, he didn't let him in. So he was excommunicated immediately. So you see, there were a lot of turmoils at the time when assignment of basically Shoghi Effendi, when Abdu'l-Baha passed away, and Shoghi Effendi had to deal with these, and obviously sister of Abdu'l-Baha was the one that were in touch with the Baha'i communities and in Iran, and was basically regulating all the affairs of the faith before Shoghi took the helm. So there was a lot of those turmoils occurring after Abdu'l-Baha passed away. So here saying that he's the interpreter of word of God, and after him will succeed the firstborn of his lineal descendant. So at the time, see, they were thinking that the guardianship would continue also, in addition to universal house of justice, which obviously never materialized. So here, his lineal descendants, and obviously he didn't have, Shoghi Effendi didn't have any offspring. the sacred and youthful branch, the guardian of the cause of God, as well as universal health and justice, to be universally elected and established, are both under the care and protection of the Abha beauty. So those, so Baha'u'llah would direct them as well. Under the shelter and unerring guidance of the Exalted One, may my life be offered up for them both. So you see here, the concept was that the guardianship would continue as well as universal hazard justice, one with acquired infallibility, the other one, which is universal hazard justice, would be infallible as well. Conferred. So here, okay. Whoso obeyeth him not, neither obeyeth them, had not obeyed God. So if you do not recognize either of them, obviously you're not obeying God. Whoso rebelled against him and against them that rebelled against God. So if you rebel against them, which again, this turmoil occurred as we referenced, you are rebelling against God. Whoso opposeth him had opposed God. So you cannot confront or oppose him either. Whoso contendeth with them had contended with God. Whoso disputed with him had disputed with God. So this is the question of ultimate interpreter of the text is the Shoghi Effendi. And of course, if you refute his interpretation, you're disputing word of God or interpretation of word of God. Whoso denied him had denied God. Whoso disbelieved in him had disbelieved in God. So people, they say, how could a 26-year-old young person be leader of the faith and ability to interpret the word of God, where we have scholars that spend decades and decades. So this doubt was in their mind, and here Abdu'l-Baha puts everybody's mind at ease that this is the person that is infallible when I'm passing on. Whoso deviated, separated himself, and turned aside from him, hath in truth deviated, separated himself, and turned aside from God. So he's basically speaking word of God or interpreting word of God. He's not creating or adding anything to it. He is the interpreter and applicability of those laws to the condition of humanity at the time of his ministry, basically. May the wrath, the fierce indignation, the vengeance of God rest upon him, the mighty. That means whoever is going to cause this problem, he's asking for the wrath of God to be upon him. The mighty stronghold shall remain impregnable and safe to obedience to him who is the guardian of the cause of God. So any deviation from his instruction would create divisions. And you see other religions, they have gone through this process of creating multiple sects because of their learned people interpreted the holy text to their advantage, and that created sects within legacy religion. So here, that window of creating multiple interpretation has been closed through this command of Abdu'l-Baha. So here, so the station of guardian of the faith and the descendant of guardian of the faith are the ones that are infallible, and they should be consulting with universal. So universal house of justice has to be consulting with the guardian of the faith. So it is incumbent upon the members of the house of justice, upon all the Afsan and Afnan, the hands of the cause of God, to show their obedience, submissiveness, and subordinate unto the guardian of the cause of God. So ultimate decision maker is the guardian of the faith. So here, to turn unto him and be lowly before him. So they accept whatever he says. He that opposeth him had opposed true one. So it's like opposing the manifestation of God. Will make a breach in the cause of God. That means that they can create branches within the religion if you oppose it, which is obviously by religion is protected from branching out. And this is the reason. Will subvert his words and will become a manifestation of the center of sedition. So the source of mischief would be this person that tried to go against the guardian of the faith. Oh friends, the hands of the cause of God must be nominated and appointed by the guardian of the cause of God. So it's very interesting that he's the one that would assign hands of the cause, not universal house of justice. So that power belonged to Shobri Effendi. All must be under his shadow and obey his command. Should any within or without the company of the hands of the cause of God disobey and seek division, the wrath of God and his vengeance will be upon him. For he will have caused a breach in the true faith of God. So we had similar process occurred on the even passing of Shoghi Effendi, when even hands of the cause were claiming to be the guardian. But hands of the cause that gathered in Haifa declared that as the protectorate of the cause of God, announced termination of the guardianship and election of universal house of justice. And that's how the first universal house of justice was formed. All right. Any questions, concerns, comments?
Gilbert, just a clarification. I may have misheard you, but the opposition of the hands of the cause, were you speaking of one particular individual, Mason Remy? Just clarifying. Correct. Thank you. Because, sure. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Mason Remy was again said this young person have more knowledge of the Baha'i religion, and he tried to create division basically in the Baha'i faith. And of course, his followers are maybe handful left, and mostly his own family.
And it was very painful for the other hands of the cause too, Gilbert, because they arose unitedly to try to deal with that. And they did it very quietly at first, but then it became very public. Thank you.
Sure, of course.
If I can add, I became Baha'i in 68, 69, so shortly after the election, right, in Hawaii. And Mason Remy had been to Hawaii 2 or 3 times. And I knew the family, Dr. Larry and Dolly Beers, were actually quite close friends with him because he was a very charismatic man, right? And when he and Ruhia Khanum came to Seattle right after he defected, and there's a talk by her in Seattle talking about their final stages when it became clear that he was defecting. And we have a copy of her talk here in Seattle. But my friend Dolly, who had a travel agency, was on her way to have another 3-day visit in Haifa. And Mason Remy had invited her because he'd stayed at her house on several occasions in the past, had invited her to stop off in Paris. And so she wrote to the house and said, well, you know, he's an old friend, and should she stop in Paris and meet with him and maybe see if they said to her, absolutely not. So I was of that era, you know, when that Mason Remy, what I call old timers, right, were going through the struggles of that. And you're right, it was very tumultuous.
No, of course. But remember, during passing of Baha'u'llah also, when Yahya Azal, his half-brother, claimed to be the leader of the Baha'i religion, or Babi religion at that time, created division as well. And that, again, historians, or not historians, but many of the people that are against Baha'i religion assigned that Baha'i religion branched out as well. Now there are Azalis, which are maybe less than 100 people left of Azalis. So there is really no division in Baha'i religion. And those are deviation from the main branch that actually died, and only their name in history is left. So similarly, people that try to do the same thing during Abdu'l-Baha's time, which I think his half-brother claimed that because he's the elder son of Baha'u'llah, he should be the basically leader of the Baha'i religion. Whereas specifically Baha'u'llah mentioned Abdu'l-Baha as his successor. So these turmoils occur during those periods of heroic age, but none of them made Baha'i religion to branch out and create basically sects within the Baha'i religion.
Right. We had up here in Washington State, up in Monroe, we had a sort of a small nest of covenant breakers. And apparently one day they found out there was a Unity Museum, and two of them came up to visit. It didn't take but 2 seconds to recognize who the visitors were. And I made a pretty clear statement, and they never tried again. They never came back.
No, it's unfortunate actually. They're carrying a torch that has been extinguished decades ago, and they're completely lost. And I'm sure within next generation, none of them would be around. Very well. Let's go to next one. All right. Any volunteers?
All right, I can read.
Go ahead.
And now concerning the house of justice, which God had ordained as the source of all good and freed from all error, it must be elected by universal suffrage, that is, by the believers. Its members must be manifestations of the fear of God and day springs of knowledge and understanding, must be steadfast in God's faith and well wishers of all mankind. By this house is meant the universal house of justice, that is, in all countries a secondary house of justice must be instituted, and these secondary houses of justice must elect the members of the universal one. Unto this body all things must be referred. It enact all ordinances and regulations that are not to be found in the explicit holy text. By this body all the difficult problems are to be resolved. This house of justice enact the laws and the government enforce them. The legislative body must reinforce the executive must aid and assist the legislative body so that through the close union and harmony of those two forces, the foundations of fairness and justice may become firm and strong, that all the regions of the world may become even as paradise itself. O Lord my God, assist thy loved ones to be firm in thy faith, to walk in thy ways, to be steadfast in thy cause. Give them thy grace to withstand the onslaught of self and passion to follow the light of divine guidance. Thou art the powerful, the gracious, the self-subsisting, the bestower of compassionate, the almighty, the all-bountiful.
All right. So here, now, what is the composition of the House of Justice, which is the source of all good and freed from all error? So this is attesting to infallibility of the body of the Universal House of Justice, not the individual ones. It must be elected by universal suffrage. That means inclusion of everyone, basically universal participation, that is by the believers. So believers are the ones that are electing Universal House of Justice. Its member must be manifestation of the fear of God and dayspring of knowledge and understanding. So these are, again, remember even Abdu'l-Baha mentioned, even on a secular parliament, although you have different groups, political groups, but when they go to the parliament, they should lose their affiliation so they can be under protection of God, under fear of God. So the only thing that makes them do good for the whole society is fear of God and shouldn't be influenced by anything else. So here also the elected individual characteristics should be that they are knowledgeable, steadfast in the God's faith, and have fear of God. And the well-wishers of all mankind. That means that now they have shunned prejudices of every kind because they're elected from members all over the world that come and congregate and create this particular institution that has no affiliation to any country or any political system. By this house, it means the Universal House of Justice. That is, in all countries, a secondary House of Justice must be instituted, and these are national assemblies. And these secondary houses of justice must elect the members of Universal One. So it's pretty clear what the instruction set is. Unto this body, all things must be referred. So any questions that comes related to holy text should be referred to the universal house of justice. It enacted all ordinances and regulations that are not to be found in the explicit holy text. So they can, based on maladies of the world community, they can issue, obviously, laws to Baha'i adherents of the Baha'i religion. So here, they can enact all those laws themselves, and obviously that doesn't exist in the holy text. And of course, they can abrogate their own laws as well. So here, by this body, all the difficult problems are to be solved. So they refer to the text themselves and get inspiration to respond to the questions that are posed to them, both spiritually or materially. And normally, I'm sure you have received letters from Universal House of Justice, which normally done by the Secretariat, that gives you the research into the text to basically have collateral of the decision that they make. So normally the way they respond is to show their decisions based on the holy text itself. So they present as a solution as the continuation of the holy text itself. And here, this House of Justice enacted the laws, and the government enforced them. So national assemblies that are executive branch, because national assemblies cannot issue any laws or abrogate their own laws. All of those legislative belong to Universal House of Justice, and local and national assemblies are the executor of the direction of the Universal House of Justice. So the legislative body must reinforce the executive. That means that they give them encouragement and directions. The executive must aid and assist the legislative body so that through the close union and harmony of these two forces, the foundation of fairness and justice may become firm and strong. So this collaboration of Universal House of Justice and national assemblies is the pillar of the administrative order for the Baha'i world order. So there should be harmony between them. That all the regions of the world may become even as paradise itself. So this process, that universally those laws would get applied and exercised based on decision of Universal House of Justice. O Lord my God, assist thy loved ones to be firm in thy faith. So this is really the key, is directing Baha'is to make sure that they don't deviate from the dictate of the Universal House of Justice and decisions they make. Now, this doesn't mean that Universal House of Justice, like any other institution, when they get the right information, they make the right decision. So is it possible, for example, that they've been fed wrong information? Similarly, because they don't have absolute infallibility. And this is really the difference between universal house of justice and manifestation of God, or Shoghi Effendi. Many times the decisions that they made, sometimes they make a decision based on information that is completely wrong. Obviously, you can't expect them to make a right decision. So this issue of conferred infallibility relates to reality that is presented to them. So this is really, it's a very interesting concept from an infallibility position itself. So as you see here, once those decisions made based on reality and fact that obviously these national assemblies present to them, the decision going against their decision is obviously blasphemy. And this is what is mentioned here. And that's really when you create a paradise in the Baha'i community. O Lord my God, assist thy loved ones to be firm in thy faith, to walk in thy ways, to be steadfast in thy cause. So this is the ultimate decision making, even if you think individually that they may have made the wrong decision. But in reality, because we don't have access to all the information that they have access to, which is universally gathered around the world, so the decisions they make may not be efficient from our perspective or where we are, but those decisions are made globally for every Baha'is. So we have to keep this in mind, that a lot of times we may think that their decisions were not accurate. But in reality, their decisions, they're under protection of God, and their conferred infallibility produces the right outcome, generally. So given them thy grace to withstand the onslaught of self and passion. So we shouldn't think that we're smarter than that institution. To follow the light of divine guidance. So that is, whatever they produce is divine guidance. Thou art the powerful, the gracious, the self-subsisting, the bestower, the compassionate, the almighty, the all-bountiful. Excellent. Any comments on this one?
Yes, Gilbert. Just in view of when the Universal House of Justice or any institution makes a decision, your point was that they can only really make a decision on what facts have been gathered. And it could be at the time, as you've stated, that those facts are not correct. So so the protection and the mandate for each Baha'i is to obey that decision, even if that decision is wrong, because thus doing prevents schism and disunity. Exactly. And the truth of that thing can be investigated further, and the light of truth through that obedient process and patient process can happen. Thank you.
No, of course. A lot of times being efficient in something may cause much greater harm. And that's really is for them to make that decision and judge that. But remember, they can abrogate their own laws also. They can reverse it without any problem. So they have a process that's built into their mandate that they can correct if something no longer applies, or they're seeing the reality comes to light, they can change it without any problem.
Gilbert, the two cases that I'm familiar with, it's not that so much that they were incorrect, they weren't up to date. And so what happened then when they corrected it, quote unquote, right, is because it was old information, and then the up-to-date information then sort of reversed a decision. And I think, yeah, that's important to remember.
No, as a matter of fact, even a lot of times, the national assemblies make decisions based on certain circumstances, and universal hazard justice comes in and reverses it. So exigencies of ultimate decision making is with the universal hazard justice. All right, very well. How much time do we have?
There's a subject I wanted to ask about from this quotation about the executive.
Go ahead.
The subject of the executive that enforces the laws. It explains the House of Justice enacts the laws, and the government enforceth them. So the enforcement of the executive, which is the government, is not the House of Justice itself, but the government doing it. So what does that that can be, depending on the country, very different, right? It doesn't have to be one exact way that enforcement occurs.
Yeah, this government relates to government of the Baha'i religion. It has nothing to do with secular government. This refers to national assemblies. Remember, at the time, national assemblies didn't exist at the time of Abdu'l-Baha. Even universal hazard justice didn't exist.
So let me ask a question to follow up, because I understand what you're pointing out. However, when you look at applicability nowadays, these institutions are all legislative, all the way down to the local assembly. They legislate. To be very frank,
they shouldn't. What do you mean legislate?
So legislative activity could be, for example, if there's a issue where there's a fire in California, an assembly in the Eastern Seaboard may decide to support the communities in the West. They want to legislate to send funds over. And that
no, that's different. That's not legislation.
That is legislation. So in the course of, like, for example, any government, the assignment of funds is an act of legislation.
No, I understand, but they cannot mandate for you to send money to that group. They don't have that power.
Well, I wasn't speaking to that. I'm speaking to the fact that when you're looking at assembly activities, they're typically legislating. I've never seen an enforcement. I mean, if you think about it, in the course of...
No, of course. What do you mean? This law of marriage, you have, 19-day feast. These are all jurisdiction of the local assemblies that is based on the administrative doctrine of Baha'i religion. So they're executor of those. Now, for example, resolution of conflict between two individuals comes to the local assembly. This is not legislative. They're arbitrator of, and these are the assignment. Legislation means that you pass a law that all adherents, Baha'i people in that community has to follow. They don't have such a power.
So, for example, if the assembly requests that a specific person do something, which happens in local assemblies context, they're asking someone to do something that is a legislative act.
No, that's voluntary.
Could I just say that's more like governance? because it's not a secular law. It's more like governance rather than legislative.
Correct.
Because legally the institution is not secular law, but it has executive power within the Baha'i community, and it's more a form of governance, is my point.
Yeah, maybe I don't
I'll
see.
give you an example. They can excommunicate somebody.
Only the House of Justice can do that.
No, national assemblies, actually, they can take your legislative right.
Yeah, so actually that was something I was thinking about in the context of legislation, which is enforcement. So only the Universal House of Justice but only the Universal House of Justice can do any act of what would be equivalent to excommunication, taking away one's administrative rights. For example, going to feast, and you know,
that's local assembly. I mean, that's National Assembly's job.
Yeah, National Assembly can do stuff like administrative rights, but
that's right.
It's to actual excommunication, which would
no, of course, that's Universal House of Justice. No, I agree. Yeah,
so the point though is an administrative sanction is a judicial activity. That is not an executive activity. So what I'm saying is, even if someone were to have lost their administrative rights in the USA community, for example, there is no enforcement mechanism that's actually in play. You have individuals that may act or may be given temporarily a proxy power to enforce, but they're not doing it of their own. It's not born of their own desire. It's the assembly legislating that someone be given the executive power to implement something.
No, actually, you're not correct. The local assembly, when they take somebody's administrative right away, they can actually prevent that person to attend those basically activities.
But let me be more clear. The assembly is only formed when the 9 members are sitting in the context of the consultation. You don't have 9 individuals that are at a feast stopping someone from going. That doesn't happen. That's
no. They what are you talking about? The secretary of the local assembly or some designee has to, if that person shows up in a feast, would go to them and say, please leave. That's their job.
But that's what I'm getting at. It's that the executive function, which means to execute the plan or to enforce it, is not something that the local assembly itself does. It's a legislative.
Whether they do it or not is a different story. That's their job.
But that's the point of, and when I'm reading this quote, and it talks about these 2 entities. There's, again, the first, which is, let me read it out very clearly. The legislative body must reinforce the executive. The executive must aid and assist the legislative body, so that through the close union and harmony of these 2 forces, the foundation of fairness and justice may become firm and strong. So the point I'm trying to get at here is, you have the legislative body that creates the law, and that it could be the local assembly stating that someone cannot come to an event, but the executive needs to be formed to do that activity that is being legislated. So if the activity is to say that we're going to send money, someone in the executive branch needs to appear to do that. Otherwise, no money gets sent.
Well, that's what you've got a treasurer for. Look, sorry about this, but I'm very confused with the language that you're using, because I don't see it in secular terms. So I understand, John, what you're trying to say, and and your, the language that you're using. But when you're just in this point that you're talking about, I just like to be really clear about when somebody's voting rights are taken off them. It is a huge process which involves auxiliary boards, which involves a whole process. But you are saying that if that person shows at the door, then they're told to leave. Well, I've seen that, and it isn't quite like that. It's a little bit different. They're not the police at the door. The process for that is love and compassion and persuasion, rather than I'm from a very different country and a different culture, so forgive me if that sounds absurd.
So-
I'm just
so
saying there are other
No,
ways.
that's exactly how it's done.
So who's given that agency to do that in your context, Sharon? That's my question.
Well, actually, what would happen in a feast if the secretary, the treasurer, and the chairperson are there? Probably the chairperson, depending, But then there would be a group kind of like process happening, because we, even if a person has their voting rights removed, that can be a very temporary thing, and we have no right to mistreat people or bar people, but we have to sit with them and say, look, until this happens, we need to just ask you that you need to leave because you're not able through this process to attend. And there's ways and means to do that without it being policing, so to speak. Sorry, I appreciate what you're trying to say, but it's just that it's on different levels for me. I heard your quote, and to me it sounded like a very formal, and I'm from an island, so I have to translate that into things like non-governmental things like governance and the process of our institutions here as they stand. That was all. Thank you. I'm sorry if I confused the situation.
No, it's fine. All right, looks like we have come to the end of the session.
But am I correct to understand, trying to just get to the crux of it here? It's very clear that various different cultures will have various different ways of implementing something that fundamentally can be expressed in many ways, depending on the culture, of course, the geography, and more importantly, the complexity of the system where they're dealing, maybe in a big city or a tiny village with less than maybe.
But John, we all follow the same Baha'i laws, is my point. How we administer them is within the framework, but the approach to that framework, the words we use, for example, may be a little different, is my point. That's all.
Yeah, so the question comes back again to this concept of what an executive would be in the context of the legislation of an assembly. So
yes,
when the assembly...
So John, what that really implies is that through the process of 9 members consulting together, that then becomes that body, that executive's joint collective decision. So all are responsible for that decision. But the protocol is usually for the chairperson to do whatever, the secretary to do whatever, the treasurer to do whatever. At a feast, it would probably be the chairperson, is my point.
Yeah, so when it comes down to whoever these people are, those roles they have as agents for the assembly, it could be an executive function to execute something, to do something. And that makes sense. However, it's very clear from anyone who joins a Baha'i community that you don't just have a treasurer, secretary, or a chairperson who's executing what the assembly says. Otherwise, you wouldn't really have a community. The reality
that would have been pre-decided in the consultative process, John. That's all I'm saying. It's different everywhere, depending on what the assembly's decision was to execute the order.
Let me finish what I'm saying, because I'm not finishing what I was saying. Anyway, so what I was trying to convey is there are members of the community that are outside the assembly that the assembly relies on to execute what the assembly has requested or legislated. So, for example, the assembly may create a committee, depending on where they are. It could be a committee, it could be a task force, whatever name the assembly may legislate into being. You'll have the assembly designating a group of people to execute what the assembly has requested. So, for example, in the election process, you may have tellers, a chief teller, and again, other tellers that assist with the voting. And more importantly, you have the assignment of people to help count the votes that, again, are trustworthy to enact the activity. You'll have as well, in the course of larger communities, you'll have people who are institute coordinators and so forth that on behalf of perhaps the regional council, they may be appointed. So again, in the United States, we have a regional Baha'i Council, which is another legislative body that's been created to meet the needs of the region that they're created for. So recently, actually, Florida just has now, I mean, we're talking in the last year or two, received its own regional council. So you had originally a Southeastern Regional Baha'i Council. Now you have a regional Baha'i Council just for Florida. Imagine the state of Florida has its own regional Baha'i Council, is its own region. So this activity of legislation where the assembly that is national or local legislates something into being, you have the appointment of the executive to enact what is legislated. So the intent of bringing this up is there are various different modes of operation. In the West or the East, you have, again, depending on the culture, very different visions of how enactment is to occur. And you have within the institutions this flexibility to enact these rules that are, again,
let me give you some advice. What you see happening, what you were describing, is actually what is happening on the ground. That means that, for example, auxiliary board member that is assigned by Universal House of Justice dictates certain aspects to, let's say, National Assembly or to local assembly. But that is completely wrong. Although it's happening, you may be correct that they try to legislate. Their role actually is as a consultant, not legislator. Their role is as a coach, and they have no execution power whatsoever.
So, not to be confused, when you have an auxiliary board member, an ABM, their role is to counsel, to advise.
That's right. But they have no legislative power that mandates the executioner, the executive branch to execute what they say.
Yes, what I'm saying is something. Let's be a little more simple. Say there's a Baha'i event that the local spiritual assembly decides it is to hold. So the Universal House of Justice, of course, has these national assemblies and these local spiritual assemblies that are subordinate. As a local event, the local spiritual assembly is the one that is going to say we're going to sponsor and host an event should it desire to. Of course, individuals can host their own events, but say the local spiritual assembly decides it's going to fund and host an event. So it puts in place the legislation to say, and again, it's not as formal. It could be simply writing down in the minutes that they've decided to say put $300 to the food, and if there's someone's home or a Baha'i center to set aside a time to host that event. And then some people who have maybe volunteered or those who are going to be requested to host the event, and make sure that, the information is spread out to the community that it's going to happen. They coordinate with the secretary of the assembly to send out material. But all of this being the legislative function to assign the executives, and the executives only to act as agents to enforce, to execute. So enforcement not being something that's a policing activity, but merely we're going to enact what we were requested of.
The looks like it's the definition of legislation, which we have obviously different meaning to it. But what you're describing, as far as I can tell, it's that process of defining a particular event, all voluntary. They cannot force somebody to do something based on what they mandate. That's the difference between the process that the local assembly tries to create an event as opposed to execute the legislative that is part of the administrative order, like rules of divorce, rules of marriage. These are So local assemblies do not, let me explain again, or emphasize, do not create legislative that is universally applied to other people. Even they cannot legislate something to enforce a particular person to give a right to another person. They cannot do that. They don't have that power.
Mr. Hakim, John, Allah, I just
Sorry.
want to say that based on Baha'i administration, if you would please refer to our legislative body only is Universal House of Justice. And they are the only one can they go with the Baha'i laws, and if in case for a few things that they have to make an exception, that would be Universal House of Justice. So our international court for the planet Earth is the Universal House of Justice. But if John, you need to read the Baha'i administration carefully, because all the administration, everything has been done already for us. So we don't need to change anything. We can't change anything. It's already there for us. We just have to follow what is in Baha'i administration, and that's it. So we don't have like America that have executive order, legislative order. We don't have that. The only thing we have is a court, international court, which it would be Universal House of Justice. That's based on the Baha'i administration.
We should take this conversation on the side. I think we're running out of time.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. Let's have a closing prayer. We need a volunteer. No volunteer? John, why didn't you?
I can say one.
Closing prayer.
Yeah, please close. Thank you.
Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants, and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, lead them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord.
Thank you very much for everyone that attended.
Thank you. Allah, friends.
And have a good night.
Allah.
See you everyone next